You know that in this channel we have touched the topic of toxic mothers a few times, from narcissistic mothers getting caught on camera, exploiting their family for clicks, to how effectively identify when your mother is simply not the person who loves you most, but all the contrary. This can be a very controversial topic because, in normal conditions, yes, it is supposed that your mother should love you unconditionally. If you're born to a narcissistic mother, it's very difficult to explain to the world the struggle you face, especially because it seems that everyone has a hard time understanding how your mother could actually harm you. But in some occasions, we run into some cases that are so bafflingly evil that even years later they become an argument against the Believe All Mothers movement. Enter Gypsy Rose Blanchard. Plot twist, she asked a guy to kill her mother. But before you jump into conclusions and before we analyze her body language for signs of regret or malice or sociopathy, it's important to understand what led her to this decision. Gypsy Rose Blanchard's case has been making the rounds for some time, so I don't expect to cover all of it in just one video. This one will serve as an introduction to her case, and as I find more examples or angles to define her behavior, I will be creating more videos as a series. Hello, welcome back, my body language buddies. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm the body language guy, and make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you don't miss any of my body language analysis and tips. Let's get down to it. Gypsy Rose Blanchard's life was far from ordinary. Born in 1991, she appeared to be plagued by a myriad of serious health issues from the very beginning. Her mother, Dee Dee, seemed to be a tireless caregiver, constantly tending to her daughter's every need. It all began with sleep apnea when Gypsy was just a baby. But as Gypsy grew older, her medical woes became increasingly complex. By the tender age of 8, she had been diagnosed with leukemia, muscular dystrophy, and an assortment of other debilitating conditions. According to DD, Gypsy required a wheelchair, a feeding tube, and an extensive array of medications to survive. Her life became an unending cycle of doctor's appointments, surgeries, and treatments, all meticulously administered by her doting mother. Yet, the mystery deepened because medical tests often yielded inconclusive or contradictory results, leaving doctors perplexed like, what's going on here? There's something that doesn't fit. Nevertheless, Didi always had an explanation ready, an answer that seemed to make sense. Her nursing training allowed her to describe Gypsy's symptoms in vivid detail. And Didi's charm and apparent devotion to her daughter only added to the mistake. She was the one who spoke during medical appointments, narrating Gypsy's intricate medical history. Her story was convincing, and caregivers and professionals alike bought into it. Even Gypsy's own father, Rod Blanchard, was convinced that their daughter was afflicted by a mysterious chromosomal disorder that explained her many health problems. But as suspicions began to percolate within Dee Dee's own family, she employed a clever ruse to escape scrutiny. Claiming to be a victim of Hurricane Katrina, Didi and Gypsy received assistance to relocate to Missouri in 2005. Didi continued her relentless pursuit of medical attention for her daughter, using the hurricane as an excuse for missing medical records. Furthermore, what nobody knew is that Didi was the one who administered medications that mimicked specific conditions and symptoms, which included her teeth falling off. Now, by this point, if this is the first time that you hear about Gypsy Rose Blanchard's case, you might have noticed that her mother is not what she claimed to be to the world. But, well, as Gypsy entered her teenage years, the story took an even darker turn. Didi began to falsify Gypsy's age, altering her birth certificate to portray her as younger than she actually was. Yet, Gypsy's journey for independence and suspicions about her own mother grew stronger by the day. In 2011, a glimmer of hope appeared when Gypsy met a man at a science fiction convention and attempted to escape with him. However, Didi swiftly tracked them down and manipulated the situation to her advantage. She convinced the man that Gypsy was a minor despite her being 19 years old at the time. Upon their return, Didi's violence escalated, and she smashed Gypsy's computer physically, restrained her, subjected her to abuse, and even denied her food. But Gypsy managed to regain access to the internet, and there she finally found some solace. She joined a Christian dating site where she met Nicholas Gojon. For the first time after becoming fully aware of her situation, Gypsy shared the horrifying truth about her mother's deception. She confided in him, revealing her pain and the emotional torment she endured. And in an act of desperation and perhaps a misguided belief in love, Gypsy asked Nicholas to do the unthinkable, to murder Didi so they could be together. And so, in June 2015, a gruesome and shocking event unfolded as Gojon entered the Blanchard home and brutally killed Didi while Gypsy waited in terror, locked in her bathroom with her ears covered. The couple fled to Gojon's home in Wisconsin, but the reckless behavior on social media eventually led authorities to their doorstep. After the dust settled and the truth began to emerge, the world was left with a chilling revelation. Gypsy had spent her entire life ensnared in a web of lies, control, and manipulation. She had been conditioned to think that no one would ever believe her, that she had no one to trust. And Gypsy's medical records, painstakingly documenting years of abuse, eventually led to a plea deal. In 2016, she pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. It wasn't until after her mother's death that Gypsy truly comprehended the extent of the deception. Today, she is free and healthy, but the scars of her past remain. As I mentioned at the start of this video, there are quite a few of Gypsy's videos and interviews making the rounds on the internet, especially because there's a fresh documentary out as well. But the question that most people are asking is, was it really necessary to make this a murder? And it's obvious that the first signs that we are going to prove with her body language is if she feels guilt about what happened, or if she really wishes it could have been handled in a different way. Don't get me wrong, there's no way to experience the extent of what she went through, but becoming a criminal usually just makes things more complicated. And yes, I will also take a look at Nicholas Gojon in a future video. But now, this has been absolutely crazy because after her release and the Lifetime documentary, she has been in a barrage of interviews from many media outlets. And at the same time, you were the ones to choose that I cover this topic. Again, there's a lot of content about this case, but for all the footage that I watched, one of the best places to begin is the Dr. Phil interview. I am not a big fan of Dr. Phil, but at least I can give him the credit this time for asking the right questions right off the bat. So we're going to watch the clips one by one and comment on body language and behavior after each one.
Should you be in this prison?
To be honest, I have complicated feelings about that. I believe firmly that no matter what, murder is not okay. But at the same time, I don't believe I deserve as many years as I got.
Okay, the first thing that I noticed right off the bat was her answer to the question, should you be in this prison? Which is in fact a very good question. Some wrong ways to ask this could be, is it fair that you are in this prison? Or how do you feel being in this prison? And those would be wrong because they will be loaded questions that can produce biases in the answers. The fact that he asks, should you be in this prison? He's asking a quite open question that can be answered in pretty much any way. And her answer is, to be honest, I have complicated feelings about that. You can see that there is a hint of a smile on her face. And that matches the statements that she has given about prison, that she has felt more free inside the prison walls than under her mother's care. When she mentions murder, in this case as a general term, you notice that she avoids looking at Dr. Phil directly. Maybe she's still ashamed of what she did, or feels guilty, or thinks that this could have gone a different way. She also shakes her head to emphasize her opinion that murder is not okay, which is a congruent body language signal with what she is saying. But before we move on to the next clip, just notice that she believes that she doesn't deserve the years that she got to spend in prison.
But your mother is dead.
She is, yes.
And she was murdered.
Yes, sir.
And you were involved.
I was.
And but for you initiating this sequence of events, she would still be alive.
Yes, sir.
I'm sure you notice a pattern here. He asks 4 direct questions. Your mother is dead, she was murdered, and you were involved. And if Gypsy had acted different, her mother would still be alive. And for all 4 questions, which are acknowledged in full by her, she always lowered her gaze. This is consistent with what we saw in the previous clip, that she feels ashamed, she feels guilty, and she regrets what happens. Only keep in mind that these are our first impressions about her, and these impressions about her body language could change. Especially interesting is the question that implies that if she had acted differently, none of this would have happened. There is a slight asymmetric pressure of her lips, which is usually related to frustration. And that frustration in the context of what we are watching could be interpreted as regret. But let's keep watching.
So in that sense, you are responsible for her death.
Yes, sir.
What would be a just punishment?
I'm not really certain on that. I do believe that I do deserve to spend some time in prison for that crime.
This is why I tell you that Dr. Phil's questions were well structured. He asks the question again with different words. So in that sense, you are responsible for her death. And to that word, responsible, she reacts a different way. This time, she doesn't avoid looking at him. Her face and chin angle are pretty much neutral, not low, not high, and she even raises her eyebrows in a sign of goodwill, of accepting her responsibility in what happened. As in any body language analysis, remember that we need to stack signals one by one so we can reach a solid conclusion. And so far, I think Gypsy genuinely regrets what happened. But at the same time, she acknowledges that she deserves to spend at least some time in prison for the crime. But let's keep watching the following clip to see the nuances of this statement.
But also, I understand why it happened, and I don't believe that I'm in the right place to get the help that I need.
Are you glad your mother's dead?
No, sir.
When she says, I understand why it happened, she's stating the other side of the argument. Maybe not to justify herself, but to imply that she has reflected upon this over the years, and she feels that she understood her reaction back then. Only notice that she doesn't make this statement personal. She doesn't say, I understand why I did it, or I understand why I made that decision, or much less, I understand why I committed that crime. It's talking in general terms. I would not be surprised that her lawyer instructed and practiced with her to talk like this, because it's a way to detach yourself from the crime itself. It happened. She also makes sure to imply that she needs help, and that prison is not the right place to get that help. And, well, yes, she's right about that. It's too bad that the answer to perhaps one of the most critical questions "Are you glad your mother's dead?" is obscured by a video transition. Even so, it's easy to spot that once again she looks away, ashamed. This once again reinforces feelings of shame and guilt. But let's see what the next clip shows.
I'm glad that I'm out of that situation, but I am not happy she's dead.
Why did you want your mother dead at the time?
At the time, I knew that I was being abused, but I didn't know exactly what kind of abuse it was.
When she says that she's not happy that her mother is dead, I think she's telling the truth. Her face muscles are relaxed, she's looking straight at Dr. Phil, and there are no changes in her voice tone. Again, this might look like she's indeed heartless or sociopathic, not having feelings about that. But you need to take into account that perhaps she has reflected upon what happened a lot since then. So that lack of emotion could be due to reviewing the events over and over again. This tells me one more time that she wishes that things had gone differently. This is the only part where I caught a very subtle dissonance between the question and the answer to the question. Why did you want your mother dead at the time? Which is a rather complex question in terms of emotions. She begins a long answer that sounds a bit rehearsed, not natural. But you can watch the rest of her answer in the following clip.
I just knew that I wasn't allowed to do a lot of things, and my mother was the reason. She would force me to be in a wheelchair and force me to go to doctor's appointments that I didn't need.
It's important to note that she went through many, many things, much, much worse than what she's mentioning here. Surgeries that she didn't need, being fed by a tube directly into her stomach, getting chemo and faking chemo for no reason, among other disturbing things. The fact that she was downplaying the extent of the abuse and torture her mother got her through makes me think that the answer was rehearsed. But this is how she finishes.
And I just wanted that life to stop. So ultimately, I never wanted her dead. I just wanted that life to stop, that life to be dead, the life I was living.
Right.
Again, from what I've seen this far, this is another confirmation that she regrets what happened, that she still feels guilty and ashamed of that. And maybe the fact that she downplayed what her mother did to her is because she doesn't want people to think ill of her mother, as crazy as that sounds. But Gypsy, at the same time, might be aware that her mother suffered a severe psychological illness, and most probably the process to forgive herself with what she did required that she came to terms with that and ultimately forgive her mother as well. And as I mentioned, there is a lot more content about this case, and I will be adding more chapters to this series as I check them out. Meanwhile, don't forget to tell me what do you think about this case in the comments. My body language buddies, don't forget to download my free 100 body language tips right in the description of this video. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm the body language guy. And remember, much love and bliss.